What I'm about to tell you cost my former boss his entire company, his reputation, and probably his career. When Marcus Wellington fired me for underperforming, despite the fact that I was personally responsible for 60% of Pinnacle Digital's revenue, he thought he was getting rid of a problem employee. What he actually did was hand me every tool I needed to completely destroy his business from the ground up. 6 months later, Pinnacle Digital was bankrupt. Marcus was unemployed, and I was running the most successful digital marketing firm in Seattle. This is exactly how it happened. "Sarah, we need to discuss your future with the company," Marcus said, his voice carrying that rehearsed corporate tone that every employee dreads. He slid a manila folder across the polished glass table in Pinnacle Digital's 23rd floor conference room. "Your performance metrics haven't been meeting our new standards. My name is Sarah Blackwood. I'm 42 years old, and until that Tuesday morning in March, I had been the Senior Director of Client Strategy at Pinnacle Digital Solutions for 8 years. 8 years of building something from nothing. When I joined Pinnacle, we were a scrappy 30-person startup operating out of a converted warehouse in Georgetown. Now we occupied 3 floors of a downtown Seattle high-rise, employed over 200 people, and generated $40 million in annual revenue. Here's the part Marcus conveniently forgot to mention during our little termination meeting. Of that $40 million, my clients accounted for approximately $24 million. I had built and maintained relationships with companies like Rodriguez Industries, Mitchell and Associates, Cascade Technologies, and Emerald City Retail Group. These weren't just accounts on a spreadsheet. They were partnerships I had cultivated through late nights, weekend strategy sessions, and the kind of personal attention that turned business relationships into genuine trust. I looked at the termination papers without touching them. "What specific performance issues are we talking about, Marcus?" "The metrics speak for themselves," he replied, gesturing to a tablet displaying charts I'd never seen before. "Client acquisition has slowed, and frankly, your approach to digital strategy feels outdated. We're moving toward a more agile, data-driven methodology." Marcus Wellington had arrived at Pinnacle 8 months earlier as our new executive director, brought in by CEO Robert Hartman to modernize our operations and scale for the next phase of growth. He was 35, Harvard MBA, previous experience at 2 failed startups that somehow looked impressive on his LinkedIn profile. He wore expensive suits, used buzzwords like synergy and paradigm shift in every conversation, and had never personally managed a client account in his life. The irony wasn't lost on me. While he was talking about outdated approaches, I had just closed the largest contract in company history 3 weeks earlier, a $4.2 million annual deal with Cascade Technologies that included digital transformation, social media management, and comprehensive analytics reporting. The client specifically requested that I remain their primary point of contact. "I see," I said, maintaining the same professional composure that had earned client trust for nearly a decade. "And who will be taking over my accounts?" Marcus shifted uncomfortably. "We'll be transitioning them to our new team structure, more collaborative, less dependent on individual relationships." Translation: he wanted to prove that the business could run without me, that client loyalty was about Pinnacle Digital as a brand rather than the people who actually did the work. It was the kind of thinking that sounds smart in business school, but falls apart the moment it meets reality. I had seen this coming, though I'd hoped I was wrong. The signs had been accumulating like storm clouds for months. My office had been moved to a smaller space during a reorganization. My access to certain financial reports had been quietly revoked. Most telling of all, Marcus had started scheduling client check-ins without inviting me, claiming he wanted to get closer to the customer experience. Last month, he'd hired 2 junior account managers, recent graduates with impressive GPAs and 0 practical experience. During team meetings, he'd started referring to fresh perspectives and digital natives who could relate to modern consumer behavior. The subtext was clear. I was old school, outdated, a relic from Pinnacle's scrappy startup days. What Marcus didn't understand, what he couldn't understand, was that in the digital marketing world, relationships aren't built on algorithms or data visualization tools. They're built on results, reliability, and the kind of strategic thinking that comes from actually understanding each client's unique challenges. My outdated approach had consistently delivered ROI that exceeded industry benchmarks by 30 to 40%. I signed the termination papers without argument, thanked Marcus for the opportunity, and walked out of that conference room with the same calm professionalism I'd maintained throughout 8 years of building Pinnacle's reputation. As I packed my office, 8 years condensed into 2 cardboard boxes, I felt something I hadn't expected. Not anger, not panic about finding another job, just absolute clarity about what would happen next. Marcus Wellington thought he was firing an underperforming employee. What he had actually done was remove the only barrier between his company and complete disaster. Looking back now, the warning signs had been flashing red for months before that termination meeting. Marcus Wellington wasn't just incompetent, he was systematically dangerous, and I should have trusted my instincts sooner. It started with small changes that seemed reasonable on the surface. 3 months after Marcus arrived, he implemented what he called cross-functional transparency initiatives. Suddenly, every client interaction required detailed reporting through a new CRM system that tracked everything from meeting duration to emotional sentiment scores of client communications. The time I spent documenting every phone call and email was time stolen from actually serving clients, but questioning the new system was framed as resistance to innovation. Then came the policy changes. Marcus introduced dynamic pricing strategies that increased our service rates by an average of 22% across all accounts. When I warned him that Rodriguez Industries had already expressed concerns about their budget for the upcoming quarter, he dismissed my feedback. Premium pricing reflects premium value, Sarah. If clients can't recognize that, maybe they're not the right fit for our evolved service model. That's when I realized Marcus fundamentally misunderstood our business. Rodriguez Industries wasn't just a client. They were a manufacturing company that had trusted me to guide their digital transformation over 5 years. Diana Rodriguez, their CEO, had started as a skeptical factory owner who barely understood social media. Through patient education and gradual implementation, I'd helped them build an online presence that increased their B2B sales by 180%. They weren't price shopping for digital marketing services. They were investing in a partnership that delivered measurable results. But Marcus saw only numbers on a spreadsheet. During his first quarterly review meeting in July, he pulled up a presentation I'd never seen before. "Sarah, your accounts show concerning patterns," he said, clicking through slides filled with charts and graphs. Average project duration is 40% longer than industry standard. Your client retention rate, while high, indicates insufficient upselling, and your new client acquisition has dropped to essentially zero. I stared at the data, recognizing my client's information, but not the interpretation. "Marcus, project duration is longer because we're delivering comprehensive solutions, not quick fixes. Cascade Technologies' website redesign took 8 months because we rebuilt their entire e-commerce infrastructure. They've seen a 340% increase in online revenue since launch. The market is moving toward rapid deployment and agile iteration," he replied, using that condescending tone he'd perfected. "Clients today want fast results, not prolonged consulting relationships." "Have you spoken to any of our clients about what they actually want?" I asked. The question seemed to catch him off guard. That's what the data tells us, Sarah. We can't rely on anecdotal feedback when we have metrics." That's when it clicked. Marcus had never had a single substantive conversation with any of my clients. He'd been analyzing their accounts from his office, making strategic decisions based on reports generated by junior analysts who also had never spoken to these business owners. He was treating 8-year partnerships like quarterly transactions. The situation escalated in August when Marcus hired Emma Chen and Jake Morrison, two recent graduates from UW's digital marketing program. During the team introduction meeting, he made his intentions clear. Emma and Jake represent the future of client engagement at Pinnacle. They understand social media algorithms, programmatic advertising, and AI-driven content optimization in ways that will revolutionize our service delivery. Emma was 24, articulate, and could create impressive PowerPoint presentations about marketing funnels and conversion optimization. Jake was 23, enthusiastic about growth hacking and viral marketing strategies. Both of them were undeniably bright, but neither had ever managed a $1 million account or guided a company through a brand crisis. Marcus started pairing them with me on client calls, ostensibly for knowledge transfer and fresh perspectives. In reality, he was positioning them as my eventual replacements. During a September meeting with Mitchell and Associates, Jake interrupted my presentation about their fourth-quarter campaign strategy to suggest they pivot to TikTok advertising for maximum Gen Z engagement. Thomas Mitchell, the 58-year-old CEO of a B2B consulting firm, looked confused. We sell enterprise software to Fortune 500 companies. Why would we advertise on TikTok? Jake launched into a rehearsed explanation about omnichannel brand presence and capturing emerging decision-maker demographics. I watched Thomas's expression shift from confusion to mild annoyance. After the call, he texted me directly. "Who was that kid? Please tell me he's not taking over our account." But the most telling incident happened in October. Marcus scheduled a strategic alignment meeting with Diana Rodriguez without informing me. When I found out, I asked to join the call. "That won't be necessary," Marcus said. "I want to hear directly from the client about their evolving needs without any filtering." The next day, Diana called me personally. "Sarah, what the hell was that about? Your new boss spent 30 minutes trying to sell me services we already have, then suggested we needed to modernize our digital footprint because our current strategy was legacy-focused. I've been with you for 5 years. Our online sales have increased every single quarter. What legacy strategy is he talking about?" I explained that Marcus was evaluating all client relationships for optimization opportunities. Diana's response was immediate. "If that man calls me again without you on the line, I'm terminating our contract. I don't care how good your company thinks he is." That night I went home and opened a bottle of wine. My husband found me sitting on our deck, staring out at Elliott Bay. "Rough day?" he asked. "Marcus is going to fire me," I said. "And when he does, he's going to destroy everything I've built." "Maybe it's time to consider other options," he suggested gently. "You've gotten headhunter calls before." I shook my head. "It's not about finding another job. It's about what happens to my clients when Marcus replaces me with kids who think marketing is about viral videos and growth hacking." Looking back, that was the moment I started thinking about what would happen after the inevitable termination. Not just for me, but for the clients who had trusted me to protect their investments. Marcus wasn't just planning to fire an employee. He was about to gamble with $24 million in annual revenue, and he had no idea what that gamble would cost him. The final warning sign came in February, just 3 weeks before my termination. Marcus announced a client portfolio restructuring initiative that would assign account teams based on demographic alignment and strategic synergy. Emma would take over technology accounts because she was a digital native. Jake would handle retail clients because he understood consumer psychology. My manufacturing and B2B clients would be distributed among the team based on capacity optimization. When I asked where that left me, Marcus smiled that corporate smile I'd learned to hate. "We're exploring elevated strategic roles that better utilize your experience, Sarah. Less hands-on client management, more big-picture thinking." Translation: They were removing me from direct client contact while keeping me around long enough to ensure smooth transitions. I was being systematically isolated from the relationships I'd spent 8 years building, and Marcus thought I was too naive to notice. He was wrong about that, too. Walking out of Pinnacle Digital's building for the last time, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years: complete freedom. While Marcus thought he'd just solved a personnel problem, he'd actually handed me the keys to his destruction. The beauty of it was, I wouldn't have to do anything unethical or vindictive. I would simply let the market decide what my relationships were really worth. I drove home through Seattle's afternoon traffic, not to wallow or panic, but to plan. By the time I pulled into my driveway in Wallingford, I had already mapped out my next 3 moves. First, I would secure legal counsel to ensure I understood exactly what I could and couldn't do. Second, I would have honest conversations with my key clients about my departure. Third, I would give Marcus enough rope to hang himself with his own incompetence. My husband David was working from his home office when I walked in with my cardboard boxes. He took one look at my face and said, "It happened, didn't it?" "It happened," I confirmed, setting the boxes on our kitchen counter. Marcus terminated me this morning for underperforming. David knew enough about my work to understand the absurdity of that claim. "What's your plan?" David knew enough about my work to understand the absurdity of that claim. "What's your plan?" "I'm going to start my own company," I said, surprised by how clearly the words came out. "And I'm going to compete directly with Pinnacle Digital." I had never seriously considered entrepreneurship before. For 8 years, I'd been building someone else's business, contributing to Robert Hartman's vision, while Marcus collected credit for my client relationships. But sitting in my kitchen that afternoon, I realized I had everything I needed to succeed independently: proven expertise, established client relationships, and now, thanks to Marcus, the motivation to prove what those relationships were actually worth. My first call was to David Kim, an attorney I'd worked with on several client contracts over the years. His law firm had used Pinnacle's services for their own digital marketing, so he understood both sides of the business relationship. "They can't prevent you from starting a competing business," David confirmed after reviewing my employment contract. "The non-compete clause is limited to directly soliciting Pinnacle employees, not clients. And since you were terminated rather than leaving voluntarily, even those restrictions are questionable." "What about client contracts?" I asked. "Those belong to Pinnacle, obviously, but there's nothing stopping clients from choosing not to renew when their contracts expire. And there's definitely nothing preventing you from accepting their business if they reach out to you independently." That evening, I created a simple spreadsheet listing all my major clients and their contract renewal dates. Rodriguez Industries, April 15th. Mitchell & Associates, March 30th. Cascade Technologies, May 1st. Emerald City Retail Group, April 22nd. The timing was almost perfect. Most of my key accounts would be making renewal decisions within the next 6 weeks. I wasn't planning to call them immediately. That would look desperate and potentially create legal complications. Instead, I would wait for them to discover my departure naturally, then respond professionally when they reached out. Because they would reach out. I was certain of that. The next morning, I registered Apex Strategies, LLC with Washington State. The name was intentional. It suggested peak performance and strategic thinking, everything Pinnacle claimed to offer, but was systematically dismantling under Marcus's leadership. I hired a web developer to create a simple professional website highlighting my experience and approach. No flashy graphics or trendy design elements, just clear information about results-driven digital marketing for established businesses. Within 48 hours, my phone started ringing. "Sarah, what happened?" Diana Rodriguez's voice was tight with concern. "I just got a call from some kid at Pinnacle saying he's taking over our account. He couldn't answer basic questions about our current campaigns." "I was let go on Tuesday," I replied calmly. Marcus felt my approach wasn't aligned with Pinnacle's new direction. That's insane. You've been the best marketing partner we've ever had. What are you doing next? I'm starting my own firm, Apex Strategies. Same approach, same attention to detail, but with more flexibility to customize solutions for each client's specific needs. Diana didn't hesitate. Send me a proposal. We're not renewing with Pinnacle if you're not there. The conversation with Thomas Mitchell followed a similar pattern. Marcus called yesterday trying to explain your transition, he said. Then he suggested we might want to optimize our digital strategy for emerging market dynamics. I have no idea what that means, but it doesn't sound like what we need. What do you need, Thomas? I asked. The same thing I've needed for the past 6 years. Someone who understands our business and helps us grow without wasting money on nonsense. Can you still do that? That's exactly what I do. By Friday, I had received inquiries from 7 former clients. I wasn't soliciting business or bad-mouthing Pinnacle. I was simply being honest about my situation and my plans. The clients were making their own decisions based on their own experiences with Marcus's new direction. Saturday morning, I met with Jessica Park, my former colleague and the only person at Pinnacle I trusted completely. We had coffee at a shop in Capitol Hill, far from the downtown business district. It's chaos over there, Jessica told me. Marcus is panicking because 3 major clients have already indicated they won't renew. He's trying to blame you for poisoning the well, but Robert is asking hard questions about why clients are jumping ship. What's Marcus telling them? That you're conducting industrial espionage and client poaching. But Robert isn't buying it. He knows you well enough to understand that's not how you operate. Jessica paused, then looked directly at me. Sarah, Marcus has no idea how to manage your accounts. Emma and Jake are smart kids, but they're in over their heads. Yesterday, Jake suggested that Rodriguez Industries needed influencer partnerships to increase brand awareness for a manufacturing company that sells industrial equipment. I sipped my coffee and said nothing. The market was about to deliver its verdict on Marcus's leadership, and I didn't need to influence that process. I just needed to be ready when it happened. One more thing, Jessica added. Marcus hired a consultant to evaluate client retention strategies. Apparently, he's just now realizing that losing your accounts could affect quarterly revenue projections. I smiled. Marcus was finally beginning to understand what he'd done, but it was far too late to fix it. The lesson was already in motion. By the end of my first week as an unemployed marketing executive, I had gained something more valuable than any severance package: complete clarity about what I was actually worth to Pinnacle Digital. The picture that emerged from my client conversations wasn't just flattering. It was devastating for Marcus's assumptions about how business relationships actually work. I spent Saturday morning in my home office, creating a detailed analysis of my client portfolio. Not for any legal proceeding or revenge plot, but because I needed to understand the full scope of what Marcus had just gambled with. The numbers were more significant than even I had realized. Rodriguez Industries, $3.8 million annual contract, renewable April 15th. 5-year relationship built on trust and measurable results. Diana Rodriguez had explicitly told me she wouldn't work with anyone else at Pinnacle. Mitchell and Associates, $2.4 million annually, March 30th renewal. Thomas Mitchell had been with me for 6 years, across 2 different agencies. When I moved to Pinnacle, he followed. Cascade Technologies, $4.2 million, May 1st renewal. The largest contract in Pinnacle's history, signed just 3 weeks before my termination. The CEO had specifically requested that all communications go through me personally. Emerald City Retail Group, $1.9 million, April 22nd renewal. A growing company that had increased their investment with us by 40% year over year for the past 3 years. 4 other mid-sized accounts, combined $3.2 million annually, with renewal dates scattered throughout the spring. total annual revenue directly tied to my relationships. $15.5 million. Not the $24 million I had mentioned to Marcus. I had been conservative in that estimate, counting only the accounts where I was primary contact. The actual number was worse for Pinnacle's prospects. But the real revelation came when I started analyzing what those relationships actually meant. These weren't just companies buying marketing services. They were business partnerships built on 8 years of consistent performance, personal attention, and the kind of strategic thinking that directly impacted their bottom lines. Diana Rodriguez had trusted me to guide her company's digital transformation from a traditional manufacturing business to a modern B2B operation with significant online revenue. She didn't just buy our services, she invested in our partnership because it delivered measurable results quarter after quarter. Thomas Mitchell had followed me from my previous agency specifically because he valued continuity in strategic relationships. His business model depended on long-term planning and consistent messaging. The idea of switching account managers every few years was antithetical to everything he needed from a marketing partner. Most importantly, these clients had contracts that allowed for termination with 30 days' notice if there were material changes in service delivery or account management. A clause I had recommended, including in our standard agreements to protect clients from exactly the kind of disruption Marcus was about to create. Sunday evening, my phone rang. Robert Hartman, Pinnacle's CEO. "Sarah, I think there's been a misunderstanding about your departure," he began. "Marcus mentioned you might be interested in discussing a consulting arrangement." "There's no misunderstanding, Robert. Marcus fired me for underperforming, despite the fact that my accounts represent nearly 40% of the company's revenue." A long pause. 40%? That can't be right. Would you like me to send you the breakdown? I have detailed records of every contract, renewal date, and client relationship. That would be helpful. I emailed Robert a professional summary that night, not to negotiate my return, but because I wanted him to understand exactly what his executive director had just cost the company. The spreadsheet was clean, factual, and damning. It showed not just the revenue numbers, but the relationship tenure, client satisfaction scores, and renewal probabilities based on my departure. Monday morning brought a flurry of activity. Jessica texted me from Pinnacle's office. "Emergency executive meeting." Robert looked pale when he walked in. "Marcus keeps saying you're exaggerating your importance." Then Diana Rodriguez called with news that crystallized everything. "Sarah, I need to tell you what happened in my call with Marcus this morning. He tried to convince me that Pinnacle's new strategic direction would deliver better results than our current partnership. When I asked for specifics, he started reading from what sounded like a marketing brochure about synergistic digital ecosystems and data-driven engagement optimization." "What did you tell him?" I asked. "I told him our current strategy has increased our online revenue by 180% over 5 years, and I'm not interested in fixing something that isn't broken." Then he said something that really bothered me. He suggested that maybe my company wasn't growth-oriented enough to benefit from their new approach. The arrogance was breathtaking. Marcus had just insulted a CEO who represented nearly $4 million in annual revenue because she questioned his buzzword-filled pitch. "There's more," Diana continued. "After that call, I reached out to Thomas Mitchell and a few other business owners I know who work with Pinnacle. Turns out Marcus has been having similar conversations with all of them. He's basically telling your clients that their current success isn't good enough, and they need to embrace his vision for transformational growth." How are they responding? About how you'd expect. Nobody likes being told their business strategy is outdated by someone who's never actually run a business. That afternoon, I received a call from Peter Donovan at Emerald City Retail Group. "Sarah, I just got the strangest call from your former boss. He wanted to schedule a strategic realignment session to discuss how my company could leverage emerging retail paradigms." "What does that even mean?" "I honestly don't know, Peter." "Well, I told him I'm not interested in paradigms. I'm interested in selling more products online, which is exactly what you've helped me do for the past 4 years. He didn't seem to understand the difference. By Tuesday, the pattern was clear. Marcus wasn't just losing my clients through incompetence. He was actively alienating them by dismissing their current success and pushing solutions they didn't need or want. He was treating proven partnerships like sales prospects, trying to convince satisfied customers that they needed to buy something different. Wednesday brought the call I'd been expecting. Thomas Mitchell, direct and to the point. Sarah, I'm terminating our contract with Pinnacle. They've assigned some kid named Jake to our account who wants to put our B2B consulting firm on TikTok. I don't have time for this nonsense. When can we start working with your new company? Our renewal date isn't until March 30th, I reminded him. I'm exercising the 30-day termination clause. Consider this official notice. That evening, I sat in my home office and realized something profound. Marcus hadn't just fired me. He had revealed the true foundation of Pinnacle's success and then systematically destroyed it. The clients weren't following me out of personal loyalty. They were fleeing his fundamental misunderstanding of their needs. The market was about to deliver its verdict, and I wouldn't have to do anything except provide an alternative when they asked for one. Thursday morning, March 15th, marked the beginning of what I would later think of as the unraveling. It started with a single email that landed in my inbox at 7:23 a.m. But by the end of the day, Marcus Wellington's carefully constructed fantasy about modern marketing would begin colliding with the brutal reality of client relationships. The email was from Jennifer Walsh, CEO of Pacific Northwest Logistics, a mid-sized account I'd managed for 3 years. Sarah, I just received the most bizarre proposal from Pinnacle Digital. They want to rebrand our trucking company as a mobility solutions platform and create TikTok content about the future of freight. We move containers from ships to warehouses. Can you help me understand what they're thinking? I called Jennifer immediately. What exactly did they propose? Your replacement, Emma something, spent an hour yesterday trying to convince me that our brand narrative needs to reflect Gen Z values and sustainability storytelling. She suggested we start a podcast called Trucking into Tomorrow and hire influencers to promote our services. Sarah, our customers are purchasing managers at Fortune 500 companies. They don't care about influencers. This was exactly what I'd feared. Emma was applying trendy marketing tactics to businesses that needed fundamental strategic thinking. What did you tell her? I told her we're not renewing our contract. She seemed shocked that I wasn't excited about becoming a disruptive force in legacy logistics. I'm exercising our 30-day termination clause effective immediately. Within 2 hours, I received similar calls from 3 other clients. Marcus's new strategic direction was essentially a one-size-fits-all approach that treated a manufacturing company like a lifestyle brand and a B2B consulting firm like a consumer startup. The kids he'd hired were applying everything they'd learned in school without understanding the fundamental differences between market segments. At 10 a.m., my phone rang with a number I recognized. Pinnacle Digital's main line. Sarah, this is Robert Hartman. We need to talk. About what, Robert? About stopping this client exodus before it destroys the company. I let the silence hang for a moment. I'm not causing a client exodus, Robert. I'm simply starting my own business. What your clients choose to do is entirely up to them. 4 major accounts terminated their contracts yesterday. 4 more are requesting meetings to discuss concerns. Marcus is telling me this is coordinated sabotage. Have you asked the clients why they're leaving? Another pause. What would they tell me? Why don't you call Diana Rodriguez and ask her directly? That afternoon, Jessica texted me from Pinnacle's office. Robert spent 2 hours on calls with clients. Marcus keeps insisting they'll come back once they see the value proposition of the new approach. Robert looks like he's aged 5 years since Monday. The truth was, I hadn't needed to convince anyone to leave Pinnacle. Marcus was doing that himself with every client interaction. Emma had suggested that Rodriguez Industries needed brand ambassadors to humanize their industrial equipment. Jake had proposed that Mitchell and Associates start a YouTube channel about consulting life to attract younger clients. These weren't strategic recommendations. They were solutions in search of problems that didn't exist. Friday brought the most significant development yet. Diana Rodriguez called with an update that revealed just how deep Marcus's misunderstanding went. "Sarah, I had the most interesting conversation with your former CEO yesterday. He wanted to understand why we're not renewing with Pinnacle. When I explained that our needs haven't changed but their approach has, he seemed genuinely confused. Then he said something that really bothered me." "What did he say?" "He asked if Marcus had been right about our business being too traditional for their evolved service model, as if 5 years of consistent growth somehow made us the problem." This was the moment I realized Marcus had poisoned Robert's thinking too. Instead of recognizing that his executive director had alienated profitable clients, Robert was starting to question whether those clients were worth keeping. I told him that any company that considers steady revenue growth too traditional probably isn't the right partner for us, Diana continued. Then I asked him a question that seemed to surprise him. "In the past 8 years, has Sarah ever failed to deliver on a promise or missed a strategic objective?" He couldn't think of a single example. Monday morning brought news that crystallized everything. Jessica called me before 8 a.m. "Sarah, you need to know what's happening here. Marcus called an emergency team meeting this morning to announce that Pinnacle is pivoting to serve more growth-oriented clients. He's basically written off everyone who's left as legacy-focused businesses that aren't aligned with market evolution." How did the team react? Half the staff looked confused. The other half looked terrified. Then Marcus announced that anyone who couldn't embrace the new direction might not be the right fit for Pinnacle's future. 2 more people submitted resignations after the meeting. That afternoon, I received a call that changed everything. Michael Torres, Senior Vice President of Digital Strategy at Nexus Marketing Group, one of Seattle's largest advertising agencies. "Sarah Blackwood, this is Michael Torres. I've been hearing interesting things about your situation." "What kind of things?" "That Pinnacle Digital just lost their most profitable account manager and several million in annual revenue because their new leadership doesn't understand the difference between B2B and B2C marketing. Is that accurate?" "That's one way to put it. We've been looking to expand our digital consulting division for established businesses, companies that need strategic thinking, not trendy tactics. Would you be interested in discussing a partnership?" The irony was perfect. While Marcus was alienating clients and employees with his revolutionary approach, the broader market was recognizing exactly what he'd thrown away. Established agencies wanted to hire me precisely because I understood how to serve the kinds of clients Marcus had dismissed as too traditional. "I appreciate the offer, Michael, but I'm building my own firm, Apex Strategies." Even better, Nexus doesn't compete directly with strategic consultants. We'd be interested in referral partnerships, maybe joint proposals for larger projects. By the end of that week, Apex Strategies had received inquiries from 6 former Pinnacle clients, 3 referrals from other business owners, and 2 partnership offers from established agencies. I hadn't advertised, cold called, or actively recruited anyone. The market was simply correcting Marcus's fundamental error in judgment, and I was positioned to benefit from that correction. The domino effect had begun, and Marcus still had no idea what was coming next. 3 weeks after my termination, I discovered that Marcus Wellington's incompetence was only part of the story. The real revelation came through a conversation I never should have heard, and it changed everything I thought I knew about my firing. It was a Friday evening, and I was working late in my temporary home office, finalizing contracts for 3 new Apex Strategies clients. My phone rang with a number I didn't recognize. "Sarah, this is Amanda Foster." The name took me a moment to place. Amanda had been Robert Hartman's executive assistant for 6 years before leaving Pinnacle last month. I need to tell you something, but not over the phone. Can we meet? We arranged to meet at a coffee shop in Fremont, away from downtown Seattle's business district. Amanda looked nervous when she arrived, glancing around before sitting down. "What I'm about to tell you could get me in legal trouble," she began, "but you deserve to know the truth about why you were really fired." I leaned forward, suddenly very focused. "Marcus didn't fire you because of performance issues. He fired you because of TechVantage Capital." TechVantage Capital. I'd never heard the name, but Amanda's expression suggested I should pay attention. 3 months before Marcus was hired, Robert started having conversations with TechVantage about a potential acquisition. They're a private equity firm that specializes in digital marketing companies. They wanted to buy Pinnacle, but they had specific requirements about the business structure. My stomach started to sink as the pieces began forming a picture. TechVantage's model is to acquire agencies and then integrate their client bases with their other portfolio companies. They create these massive centralized account management systems where clients become interchangeable assets rather than individual relationships. But they identified a problem with Pinnacle. "My client relationships," I said. "Exactly. Too much revenue was tied to one person." TechVantage's analysts said the business was too dependent on individual account managers, which made it risky for acquisition. They needed the client relationships to be institutionalized, transferred from personal connections to corporate systems. Amanda pulled out her phone and showed me a photo of a document. "I took this picture of a memo Robert left on his desk. It's from TechVantage's due diligence team." The memo was titled Pinnacle Digital Acquisition Assessment and included a section labeled Risk Mitigation Requirements. One bullet point made my blood run cold. Primary Account Manager, S. Blackwood, represents single point of failure for 38% of revenue. Recommend transition strategy prior to acquisition completion. "Marcus wasn't hired to grow the business," Amanda continued. "He was hired to execute TechVantage's transition strategy. His job was to systematically move your clients away from personal relationships and into corporate account teams, then eliminate you once the transfers were complete." Everything suddenly made sense. The new CRM system that tracked every interaction wasn't about efficiency. It was about documenting my client relationships so they could be replicated. The junior account managers weren't being trained for growth. They were being positioned as my replacements. The policy changes weren't about modernization. They were about testing whether clients would accept service disruptions. "But something went wrong with their plan," I said. Amanda nodded. "Marcus was supposed to gradually transition your accounts over 6 months, then offer you a different role that would keep you away from clients. The plan was to make the changes seem natural, like business evolution rather than acquisition preparation." What happened? Marcus got impatient and arrogant. Instead of carefully managing the transition, he started implementing changes aggressively. The client complaints started almost immediately, but he interpreted them as resistance to innovation rather than warnings about relationship damage. So he accelerated the timeline. He convinced Robert that keeping you around was actually making the transition harder because clients were too dependent on your approval for new initiatives. TechVantage's deadline was April 1st. They wanted all high-risk personnel issues resolved before the acquisition announcement. I stared at the memo on Amanda's phone, processing the full scope of the betrayal. Robert knew about this the entire time. Robert was under enormous financial pressure. Pinnacle's growth had plateaued, and he needed the capital injection. TechVantage was offering $60 million for a company that was probably worth $35 million on the open market, but only if they could guarantee the client base would transfer intact. The irony was devastating. They'd fired me to protect the client relationships, and in doing so, they'd destroyed exactly what they were trying to preserve. There's more, Amanda said. After you were terminated, TechVantage sent their own people to evaluate the client accounts. They spent a week interviewing clients about their satisfaction with Pinnacle's services and their likelihood of renewal. What did they find? That firing you had created exactly the risk they were trying to avoid. Clients were explicitly stating they wouldn't renew without you. TechVantage's analysts estimated that Pinnacle would lose 60 to 70% of your client portfolio within 90 days. And the acquisition? Dead. TechVantage withdrew their offer last Monday. The business model they wanted to buy doesn't exist anymore. I sat back in my chair, absorbing the magnitude of what Marcus and Robert had done. They hadn't just fired an employee, they'd sacrificed the foundation of their business for an acquisition that was now impossible to complete. "Why are you telling me this?" I asked. Amanda's expression hardened. "Because I watched you build something remarkable at Pinnacle, and they threw it away for money. But also because you should know that Marcus is telling people you sabotaged the acquisition through client manipulation. He's trying to blame you for TechVantage pulling out. Let me guess. He's saying I poisoned the well. Worse, he's claiming you somehow knew about the acquisition and deliberately undermined it by building overly dependent client relationships. As if 8 years of excellent service was actually a long-term sabotage plan. The accusation was so absurd it was almost funny. Marcus had created a conspiracy theory where my competence was evidence of malice, where building strong client relationships was somehow an act of corporate espionage. But the real revelation was simpler and more damning. They'd destroyed their own business trying to prepare it for sale, and now they had neither the acquisition nor the client base that made the company valuable in the first place. Marcus Wellington hadn't just fired me. He'd executed a plan that guaranteed his own failure, and he was too arrogant to understand what he'd done. The best part? I still hadn't done anything except start my own company and accept business from clients who chose to work with me. The market was about to teach them both a lesson about the difference between assets and relationships. 6 months after Marcus Wellington fired me for underperforming, I stood in the conference room of Apex Strategies' new downtown Seattle office, looking out at the city skyline through floor-to-ceiling windows. The view included Pinnacle Digital's building, though I'd heard they'd downsized to 2 floors and were considering a move to cheaper space in the suburbs. My company now employed 12 people and generated $8.2 million in annual revenue. 11 of my former Pinnacle clients had made the transition to Apex Strategies, bringing their contracts and their trust. More importantly, I'd attracted 8 new clients through referrals, business owners who valued the relationship-focused approach that Marcus had dismissed as outdated. The numbers told the story of Marcus's catastrophic miscalculation better than any revenge plot could have. Pinnacle Digital had lost approximately $18 million in annual revenue, not just from my departed clients, but from the ripple effects of their reputation damage. When word spread through Seattle's business community that a marketing agency had fired their most successful account manager and immediately lost their biggest clients, it created exactly the kind of uncertainty that makes companies look elsewhere for services. But the real justice came in the form of a phone call I received that Tuesday morning in September. "Sarah, this is Robert Hartman. I was wondering if we could meet for coffee." I hadn't spoken to Robert since our brief conversation in March, when he'd asked me to explain why clients were leaving. His voice sounded different now, tired, humbled, lacking the confident authority I remembered. We met at the same Fremont coffee shop, where Amanda had revealed the TechVantage conspiracy. Robert looked like he'd aged years in the past 6 months. His usually perfect hair was slightly disheveled, and his expensive suit couldn't hide the weight of stress he was carrying. "I owe you an apology," he began before I could even sit down. "And an explanation." "You don't owe me anything, Robert. You made a business decision. I made a catastrophic mistake. Marcus convinced me that your client relationships were a liability rather than an asset. He said modern marketing firms needed to be less dependent on individual account managers. I sipped my coffee and waited. Sometimes the best response is silence. The TechVantage deal was supposed to set us up for the next phase of growth, Robert continued. $60 million, with plans to expand nationally using their platform and resources. Marcus assured me that transitioning your accounts to team-based management would make the business more scalable and attractive to investors. What happened to the deal? Robert's laugh was bitter. TechVantage withdrew their offer 3 days after your major clients started terminating contracts. Their analysts said we'd fundamentally damaged the asset they wanted to acquire. They'd been buying client relationships, not marketing infrastructure. The irony was perfect. Marcus had destroyed the very thing that made Pinnacle valuable to acquirers, then blamed me for the consequences of his strategy. Marcus is gone, Robert said. We let him go in June after it became clear that his modernization approach had cost us nearly half our revenue. But the damage was done. We're operating with a skeleton crew now, and I'm not sure the business is recoverable. I felt no satisfaction in hearing this. Robert had been a good CEO for 7 years before Marcus arrived. His mistake was trusting the wrong advisor, not malicious intent. What are you planning to do? I asked. That's actually why I wanted to meet with you. I'm considering selling what's left of Pinnacle to a competitor. But before I do that, I wanted to ask if you'd be interested in acquiring our remaining assets, office lease, equipment, some smaller client accounts that haven't left yet. The offer was unexpected, but it made strategic sense. Pinnacle's remaining clients were exactly the kind of established businesses that fit Apex Strategies' model. Their downtown office space was larger than what I currently needed, but could accommodate my planned growth. What kind of timeline are you thinking? As soon as possible. Sarah, I need you to know that losing you was the biggest mistake I've made in 20 years of business. Marcus convinced me that individual talent was replaceable, that systems and processes mattered more than relationships. I should have known better. 2 weeks later, Apex Strategies acquired Pinnacle Digital's remaining assets for $2.3 million, a fraction of what TechVantage had offered to pay for the entire company 6 months earlier. The acquisition brought us 4 additional clients, a premium office location, and 15 employees who were eager to work for a company that valued their contributions. Jessica Park became my director of operations. 3 other Pinnacle veterans joined the leadership team. Even Emma Chen and Jake Morrison, the young account managers Marcus had hired, found roles at Apex Strategies, working under experienced supervision where their enthusiasm could be channeled productively rather than unleashed on unsuspecting clients. The Seattle business community took notice of the acquisition. Within a month, I was invited to speak at the Pacific Northwest Marketing Summit about building sustainable client relationships in a digital age. The conference room was packed, and I spotted several agency owners in the audience taking notes. I spoke about the fundamental difference between serving clients and managing accounts, between building partnerships and executing campaigns. I explained how Marcus's mistake wasn't just firing me, it was misunderstanding what clients actually valued in an agency relationship. The lesson isn't about employee retention or non-compete agreements, I concluded. It's about understanding that in service businesses, relationships aren't just nice to have. They're the entire foundation of value creation. When you treat them as interchangeable corporate assets, you discover very quickly what they're actually worth. After my presentation, a young man approached me, another Harvard MBA type, eager and confident. Ms. Blackwood, I'm starting a consulting firm focused on agency optimization. I'd love to discuss how we could help streamline your client management processes and reduce dependency on individual account managers. I smiled and handed him my business card. Thanks, but we're quite happy with our current approach. Some people never learn, but their mistakes create opportunities for those who understand what really matters. 6 months after Marcus fired me for underperforming, Apex Strategies was thriving, Pinnacle Digital was gone, and I had learned the most valuable lesson of my career. Sometimes the best revenge isn't revenge at all. It's simply being right.